was not my thing growing up. My kids have fallen in love with superheroes. My oldest son just had a birthday recently, and he had been given a Lego set of Spider-Man and some other Spider-Man figurine. It was over 600 pieces, this Lego set, and he received it for his birthday, and literally within 2 hours he had the whole thing put together and was playing around with it and completely engrossed inside of this idea of Spider-Man and him doing these things. You know, my kids are not alone. Obviously, the superhero idea has been something that has just captivated the imagination of people over the last decade, 15 years or so. It's incredible to think why. I asked my kids, I said, why do you like superheroes so much? And the two answers that inevitably come out, which I think is also part of the reason why everybody likes superheroes, is kind of two things. Number one is that we just love the idea of superhuman powers, whether it's Superman being able to fly or pick up buses, or if it's Spider-Man being able to swing from giant spider webs coming out of his wrists. Or even if it's something like Batman, who just has all of these gadgets, that we love that kind of superhuman idea to be able to go and do stuff that we can't do on our own. I think the other thing that we really enjoy about superheroes is just the story of it, that the world is meant to be in a specific way, and the introduction of the evil bad guy of some form or fashion disrupts the peacefulness of the community, and that the superhuman, the superhero ends up coming and bringing reconciliation between the community and all of these other things that are happening. The lack of peace, the brokenness of peace inside of this community gets set back together by the superhero. I want to share a text with you out of Colossians chapter 1, in which Paul describes Jesus as kind of doing something that superheroes do with their superhuman strength of bringing the world back to the way it was supposed to be. Let's take a look at it. In Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 15, Paul writes, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. And you, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven." Paul is sharing with the church at Colossae this idea of Jesus, who has reconciled all things. He has taken the brokenness of the world, the world that has lacked peace, and has brought peace back to it. He has reconciled it back. But he describes Jesus in these almost superhero-like terms. It's incredible to see what he's saying. He is the image of the invisible God. In other words, that this Jesus of Nazareth is God himself. This term image gives this idea of the perfect representation of the one who it is imaging. In other words, a perfect replication. Jesus is God himself in the flesh. Talk about having superhero powers. And then he backs it up by talking about the way that Jesus was involved in things that only God can do. By him was creation created. It was created by him, for him, through him. That all of these things that are a piece of what it means to be God, Jesus has done. And yet Jesus of Nazareth was a human that walked on the earth. Again, talk about being superhuman. The next piece that he describes is not just that creation was created through him and by him, but that creation is even sustained. In him, all things hold together. That in Jesus, that this superhuman power that he has is what continues to give us breath in our lungs, that the earth continues to rotate on its axis and revolve around the sun because of Jesus, that he himself is sustaining all of creation. It's incredible. But that this one who is created and this one who is sustaining is also the one who has reconciled and redeemed. It says that by the blood of his cross that he has reconciled all things to himself. I want to stop here a moment and think about what this means, these all things to himself. This idea of Jesus' death was not just for people. While certainly that humans were on God's heart, but that all of creation, all of the earth, all of the cosmos has been affected by the fact that humanity has disobeyed God's desire for them. That every time a human engages in some type of practice or behavior that is against God's desire for the love of all of creation, the creation itself suffers, but that the cross of Jesus not only washes away the sin of humans, but actually reconciles the very broken creation back to God. It is incredible, and it is the reason why creation matters so much. Because God loves what he has made. The other thing with this all things is that, yes, it's not just the creation that gets redeemed by God, but yes, it is you. And that's what Paul continues in verse 21, that he starts at this cosmic level, that all of creation has been redeemed and reconciled, been brought back to peace by the superhuman and superpower strength of Jesus. But then he goes and focuses in, you who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh. You see, this is the critical point of this situation, is that not only was this some superhuman God, but that this was a real human being. God showed up in the flesh. And that this means that there is this reality for us that he was a human like any other human being. Which means that we interact with him like we would any other human being, which means just as I sometimes struggle dealing with humans, I struggle dealing with other people, I get angry at what other people do, I misunderstand people, I misjudge people, I don't get what people say to me, they don't get what I say back sometimes, but that all of the things that I have with humans, I can do to Jesus of Nazareth, who is God himself. I want to share that idea with us, is that sometimes I think that we create Jesus to be this person that we just would love all of the time. That if we were one of the disciples that walked with Jesus when he was on this earth in the flesh, that we would have this idea that we would just always love him. We would always be enthralled with him. We would always just want to embrace him every moment. But I would dare say, because he is a human being in the flesh, that's probably not entirely true. That we would have had moments, much like the disciples, where we get frustrated, we don't understand, or that flatly we just so, I need some distance or some space. Am I making Jesus to be something I personally want, or really am I allowing Jesus to be himself and allowing him to change me so that I may love him the way he deserves? Lastly, I want us to think about this, is that if we're being reconciled to Jesus, that this is the biggest piece of what God has done. So often when we discuss things about Jesus and we are given an opportunity to say that we're going to follow him, that we do lay down our evil deeds and our brokenness before Jesus and say, fix it. That what we think about often is we don't think about the here and now. We're thinking about some post-life, afterlife heaven that we get to experience. We think about escaping hell and all of the ways that people describe that, and being able to go to some celestial happy place where we can have a party all the time. What's incredible about this, though, is when we do that, we actually make heaven more about ourselves than we do about the one who actually created heaven to experience with us. You see, heaven really isn't about all of our pleasures and all of the things we get to experience there, but rather heaven is about the one who reconciled us. And then I would dare say that you cannot have heaven if Jesus is not at the center, in the focus of everything that is done. I would challenge you to allow the Spirit of God to work upon you. Journal your thoughts about the idea of what are you pursuing? Are you pursuing what Jesus can give you, the pleasures of heaven? Or are you pursuing Jesus, the one in his superhuman strength came down to rescue you, to reconcile and bring you back to peace with God again? Maybe you need to make a commitment to say, you know what, I'm going to walk on a journey with Jesus. He is inviting you to follow him into that place of peace and rest. Or perhaps he's asking you to think thoroughly upon, why would I follow him? Do I want him or something he can give me? For those of you who are seeking Jesus, I encourage you to seek him for who he really is. Not some image of Jesus that you can come up with on your own that allows you to feel comfortable or complacent. For those of you who are not seeking Jesus, I encourage you to explore. Continue to watch and listen to the videos online. I encourage you to email us with questions you might have, that we can help you as Jesus looks to show himself to you.